I met Rockefeller through a female attorney I knew who called me up one day and said, one of the Rockefellers would like to meet you. I had made a video called Mad as Hell, and he'd seen the video and wanted to meet me and knew I was running for governor of Nevada. So sure, I'd love to meet him. And I met him, and I liked him, and he was a very, very smart man. And we used to talk and share ideas and thoughts. And he's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told him what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event. And out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. And we'd go after Chavez in Venezuela. And sure enough, later, 9/11 happened. And I remember he was telling me how how you're going to see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places. And there's going to be this war on terror, of which there's no real enemy. And the whole thing is a giant hoax, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people.
He told you it was going to be a hoax.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's no question. He says, there's going to be war on terror. And he's just laughing. There's no... Who are we fighting? I mean, why do you think 9/11 happened and then nothing's happened since then? Do you think that our security is so great here that these people who pulled off 9/11, who were able to, can't knock down another plane? Come on, it's ridiculous. 9/11 was done by people in our own government and our own banking system to perpetuate the fear of the American people into subordinating themselves to anything the government wants them to do. That's what it's about, and to create this war, this endless war on terror. And that's why and that was the first lie. And the next lie was going into Iraq, to get Saddam Hussein out with his weapons of mass destruction. That was the next lie.
Now, specifically, this was a little over 6 years ago?
This was...
11 months before 9/11.
Yeah.
And Nick Rockefeller, who's a lawyer, he's become your friend over the previous years, and he's saying to you that there's going to be this big event, and then out of that we're going to have a war on terror, and it's just going to go on and on.
Right. An endless war on terror without any real enemy. That you can never define a winner.
And did he say that it's going to be perfect because you can't define an enemy, it just goes on?
Yeah, because you can't define a winner. There's no one to beat, so it goes on and on forever. And they can do whatever they want. They scared the hell out of the American public. Look, this whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. It's very difficult to say it out loud because people are intimidated against saying it. Because if you say it, they want to make you into a nutcase. But the truth has to come out. That's why I'm doing this interview. The fact of the matter happens to be that the whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. Yeah, there's a war going on in Iraq because we invaded Iraq. And people are over there fighting, But the war on terror, it's a joke, And until we discover what really happened on 9/11 and who was responsible for 9/11, because that's where the war on terror emanates from. That's where it comes from. It was 9/11 that allowed this war on terror to begin. And until we get to the bottom root of 9/11, the truth of 9/11, we'll never know about the war on terror.
And I hated the sanctions. I was doing this because I hated the sanctions. I was doing it because I thought because they had destroyed education, they wiped out literacy in a single generation, they destroyed the hospitals and the healthcare system. Iraq performed the second heart transplant in the world, and we wiped them out. Okay? 11,000 people died every month. By the end of 1996, 500,000 children had died of sanctions, and they only counted 5-year-olds and younger. They didn't even count the 6-year-olds because the United Nations was holding back the numbers. And after that report in December of 96, they stopped counting it. The United Nations never published another report on the deaths. So frequently what you will hear is that only 500,000 children died, but in fact they continued to die, and approximately 1 million children died. They were babies. They weren't even alive when the first Gulf War happened. This was an offense against, this is genocide. This is a mass genocide. So that's my motivation. But the CIA did not have my motivation. They were out to make sure that the United States was not going to be punished for what they had done. On August 2nd was the Senate nomination hearings for Robert Mueller to head the FBI. He was going to be the FBI director. And I was on the phone with my CIA handler, Richard FUISZ, and I said, there's not one single terrorism investigation this man hasn't thrown. Oops. That's okay. He threw the Oklahoma City bombing investigation. He threw Lockerbie. And I said, this man should not be the FBI director when this next attack occurs. And Richard FUISZ said to me, my God, what if there is no FBI director when this happens? I said, do you think it's that soon? Do you think the attack is imminent? He said, oh yeah. He said, it's absolutely just in the next couple of weeks. He said, I don't want, and I said, well, God, Richard, I'll go back to New York right now and I'll pump the Iraqis and see if they've got anything from Baghdad. I'll see if they have any news for us. And he said, oh my God, Susan, do not go back to New York City. It's too dangerous. We are expecting the use of a miniature thermonuclear device. And they were not afraid that I was going to be hurt by like falling debris in the World Trade Center. I wasn't going to be at the World Trade Center. They were afraid of radiation contamination, like the winds blowing the radioactive stuff. And that's what he was like, don't go up there. We're expecting mass casualties. And I said, well, Richard, I'll go up the day after. I can tell you the exact day. It was a Thursday. And I said, I will go up to New York on Saturday and I'll report to you on Monday. And we'll just find out if the Iraqis have anything to give us. I went up to New York. The Iraqis said, ain't got nothing. We don't know. We don't know anything about this. You keep telling us about this. The only way we know about it is because you're talking about it. But we don't have any information to give you. And if we did, we understand the consequences. We know that if we don't help you, you're going to go to war with us if you think we did. And if there was anything we could give you, we would do it. So I go back and I report that on August 6th. On August 6th, there is a memo to the president telling him that this is a high security threat, that it is an emergency level, that it's imminent. Okay. At my meeting with Richard FUISZ does something very important. He tells me that because of my direct contacts with Iraq and Libya, I should be the one. I am perfectly positioned, because everyone likes to think that Iraq and Libya are involved in terrorism to begin with. I should be the one to contact U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft's office. And I should tell them that we're looking for what's called an emergency broadcast alert across all agencies, seeking any fragment of intelligence involving airplane hijackings and a strike on the World Trade Center, identified specifically.
My position was a chief of shift, which was responsible for receiving and collecting data from the periphery laboratories concerning nuclear explosions. And my duty was just to, how to say it? I was like a chief of the shift, and my duty was to collect the things and to pass it to the operational officers, and to superiors.
That's a very responsible position.
Yes, it's a very responsible position, because all the recognition of the nuclear test of the enemy of the USSR actually come through my hands. Because the 12th Chief Directorate was the organization primarily responsible for nuclear testing of the Soviet Union. I knew a lot of officers who were involved in that, and I was friendly with many of them. And because I served in particularly the Soviet nuclear intelligence, which was responsible for detecting nuclear explosions of the various adversaries of the Soviet Union, I also have experience of the nuclear testing of the others.
Who is Mike Harari, and how did he come to confess to organizing 9/11 to you?
Oh, it's a quite complicated story, because I used to live in Thailand, in Bangkok, and Mike Harari also happened to live here at that time when he escaped from Philippines. And I was introduced to him by some Mossad people, and we became very friendly with him eventually. And that's because we were just very close and very friendly. And I spent a lot of time with him for like almost 2.5 years. And that's why we have a lot of different conversations, so I have chance to hear from him some things which he should not tell me actually, but he did.
Okay,
So
and you have obviously an intelligence background yourself. So what specifically did this guy say, this Mike Harari, about 9/11?
You see, I got acquainted with him before 9/11, and what was strange that during our conversation before 9/11, he attempted to ask me if I ever heard about the built-in nuclear demolition feature of the Twin Towers, which by default means that he knew about that also, because he revealed it by
you knew
us.
about this. Did you know about this independently of him?
Otherwise, he cannot ask me this question.
Right.
Of course,
Okay.
he knew about it. So, and that was particularly strange. And after that, I just realized that he was trying to make sure that, to discover if the Soviet side knew about this in advance, before 9/11. So perhaps he can adjust some settings for 9/11 based on this knowledge.
That's
okay,
very
and,
interesting.
yes. And actually, Harari was very happy to make this. And prior to 9/11, he also gave me a few advices, which clearly indicates that he was expecting it. Like, for example, I think 2 days before 9/11, no, 1 day before 9/11, he advised me to change all the currency which I have in the US dollars into something else, just for example, because he said that something is going to happen and that might affect the rate of the US dollar. And in addition to that, because I never used TV set as a matter of principle, and he knew that, he also presented me one of his TVs a few days before 9/11, because he said that I should have a TV because I will have chance to watch something very interesting. And I still even keep this TV until now. So means he was really, he knew about this, that the things are coming. And after September 11, actually, he made the celebration of that, and I also was invited there.
Did he actually call it a celebration of 9/11?
Yeah, you know, when someone drink wine in early breakfast, it looks like celebration, really. Especially 12th of September.
And so after the attacks, when did he start to talk to you about having been involved in organizing them?
Practically on the 12th of September, in some way. Because, you know, when he was celebrating that, he was boasting that, oh, that's what he has done. That is just like, he can only dream about this all his life, and that is the happiest moment of his life, and just something like that.
Wow. I would think that would be a very unwise thing for him to do. He must have trusted you, but why would he trust you that much?
But as I told you, that we were very close actually, and he treated me almost like a member of his family. He treated me actually better than his son. So and you know, I used to spend in his house most of the time, and he invited me for every breakfast, for every lunch, for every dinner, and he allowed me to repair his computers and so on. So we were just very, very close.
Wow. And so he kind of gradually opened up to you and told you more and more about his involvement?
Yeah, because, you know, because he feel boring probably in Bangkok. He has no friends here. So, and I was one of his closest friends, almost like a relative. So, and when you have just someone to talk every day for for almost 3 years, you will really reveal him a lot of things. So I think that is the problem. Because he had no, actually.
No, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say that he had no friends, so when I was actually one of his friends only, available to talk.
And he's a pretty older man, isn't he? I heard he was well into his 80s now, so he would have been into his 70s then?
Yeah, I think he was born in 1927. Yes, he was very old now by that time.
And so, what kinds of things did he talk about after that in terms of his involvement in 9/11?
He didn't just say it plainly, but I mean, from small details revealed from time to time, I can understand a lot. Like, for example, about the missile that hit the Pentagon, I learned from him. Otherwise, I will not even know about it because I was not there.
And what did he say about that?
He just explained to me that the missile that hit the Pentagon was stolen from Kursk submarine, and because if not, I will simply don't even know about this.
Huh. So he described the kind of missile that it was, and from what I understand from the story in Veterans Today by J.B. Campbell, that story claims that the missile hit the Pentagon, and attached to the missile was a nuclear warhead that fortunately did not explode. Did Mike Harari say all these things?
No, this one about the actual setup that why they decided to press the red button to collapse the Twin Towers. That I learned much later, maybe in 2007, I think. So at the time when I have the conversation with Mike Harari, I knew some details, but not all details.
Interesting. And so how long did your relationship with Mike Harari last then?
Almost 3 years.
So that was from about, 2000 to 2003, 2004?
No, so not 3 years, more than 2 years. From 2001 until 2003. From the beginning of 2001 until the end of 2003.
And about how many separate things did he say over that time? How many times did he say things that indicated that he had been responsible for 9/11?
Because I spent with him almost every day and many hours per day. Can you imagine? A lot. Because I have endless conversations with him. So during these conversations, he really said a lot. Not only about other things also.
Yeah, let's try to get as much hard stuff that he said about details of having been involved in 9/11 on the record right now as we possibly can. That's probably a good thing for you too, as well as for everybody interested in this issue. So what are some other things he said indicating insider knowledge and participation?
Okay, you see, first of all, you have to understand that Mike Harari is an intelligence officer, okay? So he would probably be a little bit careful to say things plainly. So, means you have to, read between the lines sometimes, trying to guess what he... But at least what I learned from him is this, that he knew about the built-in nuclear demolition feature of the World Trade Center before 9/11. This is one thing. The second thing, that it appears that he got acquainted with me for this particular reason, because he wanted to ask me if the Soviet side knew about that things also or not. That is already a lot. The third thing, that he was celebrating 9/11. Because, the Israeli people in general, they are very sensitive when it comes to terrorism. So when they hear about any terror act, they will never celebrate it because, they take it very serious. But,
of course, 9/11 was a big exception to that. Netanyahu virtually publicly celebrated when they asked him, what's your reaction to 9/11? Netanyahu said, it's very good. And then he backtracked. Well, it's not good, but it's good for us. And likewise, of course, we have the dancing Israelis in New York, apparently Mossad agents who were pulled, celebrating the destruction of the towers. They allegedly set up to film before the first plane hit, and they were found with their socks stashed with cash, and were arrested. They allegedly failed lie detector tests, spent a couple of months locked up in the U.S., and then were deported back to Israel, where they appeared on TV and said that they were only there to, quote-unquote, document the event. So I guess Mike Harari wasn't the only Israeli to be celebrating 9/11. But that doesn't prove he did it.
Sorry?
Simply knowing about the nuclear feature, the alleged nuclear demolition feature, and celebrating the attack afterward doesn't necessarily mean that he did it.
Yes, but you see, the point is like this, that as I told you, that before 9/11, a few days before 9/11, he did something that reveals his foreknowledge of this. First of all, that he advised me to change the U.S. currency into something else, claiming that something might happen with the rate of the U.S. dollars very soon. And another thing, that he presented me a TV to watch the thing, because I didn't have the TV. So it says a lot already. And later, I mean, during our conversation after 9/11, many times he told me that how much he hates the American and how he organized this, and yes, he admitted that.
So he did say that he organized 9/11.
Yes.
This is an orange. If you were told it was something else, you wouldn't believe it, would you? This is called visual identification based on experience. This building is about to be destroyed in what is called a controlled demolition. Buildings do not do this spontaneously. Here is another example of a controlled demolition. The initial charges are spaced about 1 second apart, and you can see that each section begins falling separately. Successful demolitions require that all structural support columns collapse at virtually the same time. If they don't, or if something else goes wrong, the result will look something like this. This is World Trade Center 7 just before it collapsed on September the 11th, 2001. It had not been hit by an aircraft. It had been damaged by falling debris and fire. But by 5:20 p.m. most of the fires had been extinguished. Although the building was 47 stories high, it doesn't fall sideways, nor collapse unevenly. For this to have happened, all of the building's vertical supports must have given way at almost exactly the same time. Yet the Federal Emergency Management Agency reported that the collapse was due primarily to fire. But what does it look like to you? So the question is, do you believe what you can see with your own eyes? Or do you believe what you are told?
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. Planned implosion.